This is one of the deepest truths I have come across ever. Somehow it's imperative we know history. Only Yahuwah can deal with these people. They are beyond evil. This is without a shadow of doubt why Yahusha said about them in Revelation 2 to 9. It isn't a matter of debate on any level that historically Africa has been the most tormented and tortured of the planet's continents and regions, ravaged by centuries of colonialism and its bastard child, the transatlantic slave trade, imperialism, civil wars instigated by foreign intelligence agencies, the plundering of natural resources, and Fox humanitarian interventions in mass. It seems that Africa just cannot find the salam it undeniably and screamingly deserves. Much has been written about Africa's plight being a product of Western aggression and Western racism. But this is only a partial truth, as is so often the case when a discussion of world events and world history is initiated in the modern era of media domination, manipulation, and disinformation. There are hidden hands behind every bit of genocide and suffering in Africa, past and present alike. The Rwandan genocide wasn't a product of years of ethnic tension between Hutu and Tutsi, as it is so familiarly repeated in parrot-like fashion, an assessment awash in colonialist and orientalist undertones and overtones. It was the result of Zionist Western intrigue, neo-colonialism, and intelligence operations at the highest levels. A devilish assassination was the spark of massacres and ethnic cleansing that eventually became genocide. Juvenal Habyarimana, the third president of Rwanda, was brutally murdered on April 6, 1994, when his plane was shot down by the forces of Rwandan Patriotic Front, led by current Rwandan President Paul Kagame, who holds the office despite being accused of plethora of war crimes. This was the culmination of seditious warfare that began in late 1990 when Kagame's Rwandan Patriotic Front invaded from the Zionist proxy state Uganda with backing, funds and arms from the CIA and US State Department. Jewish Zionist war criminal Madeleine Albright, in collusion with Kofi Annan, covered up the origins of the Rwandan Patriotic Front and its atrocities in the United Nations. Kagame was fully backed by the Zionist-occupied governments of America, Britain, and Israel itself provided direct support as well. Mossad agents were embedded with Kagame's Rwandan Patriotic Front from 1990 until the genocide concluded in 1994. 18 years after the historic 100 Days of Genocide in Rwanda, the United States government has suddenly produced never-before-seen satellite images to support the genocide extradition trial of a former Rwandan, now US citizen in New Hampshire. The existence of satellite imagery shot over Rwanda would enable the international community to further explore heretofore hidden facts about the double presidential assassination of April 6 or massacres committed before, during, and after 1994. As the world commemorates the official Rwanda genocide story on the 18th anniversary of Rwanda genocide, the people of Central Asia continue to suffer under the brutal terrorism of Kagame military regime. Instead of celebrating, we should be asking who the real victims and who are the real criminals and what really happened in Rwanda. In his opening statements in a Concord, New Hampshire courthouse on February 23, 2012, federal prosecutor John Capin launched the US government's trial against a 41-year-old Rwandan so-called genocide fugitive by fielding satellite photographs purposely showing the roadblocks where she commanded extremist Hutu militia and ordered the rapes and killings of Tutsi in Rwanda in 1994. In a remarkable development, this is the first time in the history of Rwanda genocide trials or related Rwanda asylum hearings where Pentagon satellite photographs have been produced as evidence, and the first time that the existence of satellite photographs taken over Rwanda during so-called 100 days of genocide has been verified. Kigame Kimche's puppet and protege, surely as a repayment for its help in establishing his rule, has become one of the usurping Jewish entity's most visible and vocal African allies. He visited occupied Palestine for the 60th anniversary of Nakba and became initiated in the Jewish religion of Holocaustianity. During his visit, he met with Israeli war criminals Shimon Peres and Zipi Livni, as well as Burkina Faso's President Blaise Compaoré, another Mossad asset who, with strong Israeli support, overthrew and murdered Burkinabe revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara, one of the greatest freedom fighters of the modern era. When it was all said and done, the Mossad Rwanda Patriot Front CIA nexus murdered about 1 million men, women, and children, and the majority of the victims were Hutu and not Tutsi, as the official reports has it. World opinion on the Rwanda genocide remains diluted, largely in part to the viral viewing of the critically acclaimed film Hotel Rwanda, which depicts Kagame and his Rwanda Patriot Front band of slaughterous thugs as heroes. Hotel Rwanda was produced by Lionsgate Films and United Artists, both owned and operated by Zionist Jews. Rwanda needs its freedom, and a perfect way to start a struggle for it would be to scrap the treachery of US aid and Meshev, therefore alleviating the East African nation from any more unnecessary Zionist plunder. The African Jewish Congress is an affiliate of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and the World Jewish Congress, one of the most powerful Jewish Zionist groups on the planet. The executive director of African Jewish Congress is Rabbi Moshe Silberhaft, Feigenbaum's partner in Zimbabwe, who was rabbinically ordained in occupied Al-Quds and is a citizen of the criminal Zionist entity. To repeat, Feigenbaum is no humanitarian, no human rights activist. She is a cultural Zionist imposing cultural Zionism. The legendary Nigerian revolutionary and musical renegade Fela Kuti famously declared that European cultural imperialism was the biggest enemy of the African and was the thing most vital for him to fight against. In this spirit, an addendum should be added that Jewish cultural imperialism is an enemy just as deadly to the African, if not more so, due to Jewish religious teachings and Zionist occupation policy, both being inherently anti-black. Cultural Zionism will install in its African victims a brutal cognitive dissonance in which they vehemently despise racism but also love Zionists, despite their abyssal and ancient supremacist beliefs, specifically in a regard to the African, who in their Judaic worldview is eternally damned to slavery and blackness because of the curse of Ham. Former president that the Jonathan regime brought in a team of Mossad and CIA operatives overseen by Israeli ambassador to Nigeria Moshe Ram to probe its security service. The Zionist entity is attempting to break up Nigeria using Boko Haram Islamic group cause the country has oil, gold, etc. Jean Bedel Bokassa, the closest friend of the megalomaniac Bokassa, was one of the usurping Jewish entity's famous generals. General Shmuel Gonen Gorodesh, the Israeli general, in addition to his military and security advice, built up the public relations of Bokassa throughout the globe. Gonen Gorodesh also embezzled large amounts of taxes and customs from the state treasury. Though their relationships didn't last long, when a military coup ousted Bokassa from power, Gonen Gorodesh helped him flee to the Ivory Coast. The small, troubled, and diamond-rich Sierra Leone was virtually run by Marat Balagula, the Ukrainian Jewish mob boss of the world's most powerful criminal organization on earth, the Red Mafia. Sierra Leone's president Joseph Momo didn't have any problem with the Jewish syndicate setting up globe smuggling and money laundering operations in Freetown because Balagula's associates in return bankrolled Momo's 1985 presidential campaign. Mossad agent named Shabtai Kalmanovich, who trained Momo's presidential guard and assisted in the crushing of an attempted coup in 1986. Balagula and Kalmanovich were introduced by Rabbi Ronald Greenwald, a frontman for the interests of Mark Rich, the famous billionaire Jewish criminal pardoned by Bill Clinton. Zionist network in the Congo. They have a monopoly over Congo's diamonds, a dominant stake in Congo's copper, and the largest cobalt mining company in the world. The Congolese government, in exchange for high-level Israeli defense and intelligence assistance, gives them access. Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, the Burkinabe revolutionary pan-Africanist and rightist leader of Burkina Faso from 1983 to 1987, was certainly the Che Guevara of Africa. Sankara was known for his incorruptibility and radical policies that included land reform, women's rights, literacy promotion, education, famine prevention, resource nationalization, anti-neoliberalism, anti-Zionism, anti-imperialism, public healthcare, social justice, and legal punishment for all previous oppressors, colonialists, and collaborator alike. Thomas Sankara was nothing short of remarkable. Unfortunately, however, his extraordinary and pristine life came to an end on October 15, 1987, when he was overthrown and executed in a coup d'etat by Blaise Compaoré. It has been known for quite some time, in all actuality, that French intelligence and the CIA aided the coup, but there is yet another player that isn't discussed. Not only has the usurping Zionist entity's Foreign Affairs Ministry described Burkina Faso as one of Israel's most loyal friends in Africa, but Blaise Compaoré is an honorary member of the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation. The Zionist entity has also fully restored its diplomatic ties with the Western African nation of Ghana, more than 4 decades after Mossad overthrew Ghanaian founding father and cherished leader Kwame Nkrumah in its secret war against the Chinese Secret Intelligence Service. The usurping Jewish entity would end the war with the CSIS after Nkrumah affair and then forge an alliance with it to curtail Soviet influence in Africa as per the policy designed by Mir Amit to keep the superpowers divided and weakened in the name of Jewish survival. Mossad would do just that in the years following, pitting Chinese operatives against Russian operatives and using Africa as the battleground. British colonial regime, one of at least 1,090 Kenyans executed in this manner during 1950s, along with 300,000 other Kenyans thrown into British concentration camps. He chose dignity over humiliation, liberation over subjugation, death over life in slavery. It is this kind of steadfastness that the African continent needs now, maybe more so than ever before. Without it, the Jewish exploitation machine will continue onward with its rampage through Africa, leaving an oceanic trail of blood in its tracks. Kenyan regime signed a security pact that would have Israeli security consultants sent to East African nation to govern its assault against Islamic resistance of occupied Somalia, Al-Sahab. The Somali resistance assailed the Kenyan regime for the traitorous move, slamming the deal as an attack on Islam. Gaddafi was planning to introduce a gold dinar into African economy for oil trade, a move that would have devastated Jewish Zionist financial domination of Africa. From the moment of Zimbabwean independence from the Rothschild Empire, Mugabe, himself imprisoned by the apartheid regime for a decade, 1964 to 1974, initiated a program of land reform aimed at redistributing the land confiscated by Rhodesian settlers back to their rightful owners, native Zimbabweans. The British government, an agent of Rothschild interests, entered into an agreement with Mugabe that it would take care of the Rhodesian settlers. Typically, it reneged in a deliberate attempt to break the back of Zimbabwean government and send the country into chaos. Mugabe, who built excellent programs of national health care and education, resulting in a literacy rate of 95% among indigenous Zimbabweans, the highest in Africa, as compared to an abysmal 39% during the apartheid years, resisted in the name of his people. And as a result of his sincere resistance to the Western plot, the American and the British governments, as well as the IMF, an institution dominated by the Zionist Jewry, imposed devastating sanctions on his country. The sanctions have prevented the Mugabe government from importing raw materials, laying the agricultural and industrial sectors of Zimbabwe to waste. Because of Mugabe's historical principled stance on Palestine and his courageous effort to stop Jewish monopolization of Zimbabwe's clothing and textile sectors, the usurping Israeli regime has joined in the economic aggression against the South African nation. The Zionist regime's industry, trade and labor ministry, along with the Kimberley process, an Israeli-run forum that fronts as a human rights group interested in stopping the flow of blood diamonds onto global market, and Human Rights Watch, the notorious NGO funded by billionaire Zionist mega criminal George Soros to the tune of $100 million, teamed up to punish Zimbabwe for alleged human rights abuses and corruptions. On March 5, 2012, the World Wide Web was set ablaze by a glossy, emotional and deceptive video called Kony 2012 about a Central African rebel group known as the Lord's Resistance Army and its leader Joseph Kony, produced by a group called Invisible Children. The Kony 2012 campaign attracted celebrities from across the Hollywood spectrum and garnered major attention from the Zionist media. If these weren't suspect enough, the red flags were solidified upon examining the campaign poster, which featured Joseph Kony alongside Osama bin Laden and National Socialist Germany's Adolf Hitler. Slamming a leader as Hitler, his country as Germany, and his people as Nazis is a common, tiresome, ad hominem, and reprehensibly slanderous attack that Jewish power matrix has utilized incessantly since the horrific fall of National Socialism at the hands of genocidal Allied Axis during World War II, most specifically against German people themselves, Palestinians and Iraqis. And Osama bin Laden, of course, has been the boogeyman used by international Zionism to justify its ongoing Orwellian war on terror. The matter was quite reminiscent of the Save Darfur farce, a campaign that began as an exclusive project of the American Jewish community, with the hardline of the Zionist groups like American Jewish World Service and Jewish Community Relations Council leading the way in the propagandistic assault of the government of Sudan. More than half of the $100 million raised ended up in the Israeli banks to fund the illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. Kony 2012 is no less fraudulent, as Joseph Kony is wrongfully depicted as this supremely influential warlord who has built up a massive murderous army through the widespread physically, psychologically and sexual abuse of child soldiers. Nowhere in the video does it mention that Kony's LRA was originally comprised of the Akoli people, an ethnic group repressed and enslaved by the Rothschild-financed British colonialists. Led by Julius Nyerere from 1961 until his retirement in 1985, was an Israeli client state from the moment of its independence in 1964, establishing uninterrupted security, diplomatic and economic ties. Most recently, the Zionist entity has taken a substantial portion of control of Tanzania's vast mining operations, with the Angel Invest mega corporation of Israeli money man Jacob Engel taking hold of 3 mines and securing dominion over Tanzanian gold, copper, nickel and other metals. Nyerere himself was not only an ally of the Jewish occupation regime but a devoted supporter of the Zionist cause, once ridiculously and insultingly declaring that war criminal Golda Meir was the mother of Africa. Nyerere personally believed that any enemy of the Jews was the enemy of the black. The relation between Tanzania and Israel were of special kind, and there is no doubt that this was due to the ideological veneration of Nyerere, which was highly peculiar for a third world leader of his stature. On November 23, 2010, an important story reported in the Hebrew press of the Zionist entity, then picked up by the Islamic Republic of Iran's press TV, revealed a rather bothersome development. A retired Israeli colonel by the name of Aviv Sivan had died in a helicopter crash near Uganda, the capital city of Central African nation of Cameroon. Sivan was responsible for training the Cameroonian Presidential Guard and was also the head of Jewish supremacist entity's military delegation to Cameroon. The malevolent apartheid regime of South Africa is perhaps where the Jewish supremacist entity's ties were the strongest. In South Africa, Jews benefited and thrived under the racist regime's protection, maintaining and strengthening their ties with the Zionist entity. The Board of Deputies of South Africa Jewry, a major Zionist lobby front on the African continent, declared neutrality in regards to the apartheid, so Jewish interests weren't compromised. The Israeli security establishment saw the relationship with South Africa so vital, in fact, that it actually believed that the ties saved the Jewish state from extinction. Speaking of Angola, where the Zionist entity was active with South African forces, it should be mentioned that Angola warlord Jonas Savimbi, the seemingly eternal darling puppet of American Jewish lobby, the neoconservative establishment, and Israel, was assassinated by Zionist special forces when no longer served a purpose. Full diplomatic relations have been established between the two entities, so Tel Aviv can officially take control of South Sudan's oil-rich economy because China also wants the oil. Israel has been exceedingly active in Ethiopia for decades upon decades, but 1990 is where relations hit new peaks. The Zionist regime fueled the Ethiopian civil war as a testing ground for what it would do with its real enemies, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Israel supplied the regime of war criminal and collaborator Mengistu Haile Mariam with cluster bombs, several hundred IOF military trainers to guide the Ethiopian army, 150,000 bolt-action rifles, and an unknown number of its patented Uzi machine gun. Welcome to Africa, where Zionist tentacles extend throughout the continent. What the people of Africa, black and Arab, Christian and Muslims, and everything in between must know is that the Zionist entity, inspired by a primordial Jewish supremacist ideology, has no interest in your land except to exploit it, exploit you. Zionism is a cancer that infects and destroys everything in its path, but like any other cancer, it can be counteracted and cut out, so it never returns. O Africa, cut the Zionist cancer from your midst, cut it out like a knife to flesh, and vow never to mix with it again. For anyone and everyone who has suffered at the hands of the usurping Jewish entity, to all oppressed peoples from Africa, to what lies beyond its beautiful and ancient borders, heed the call, cut out the Zionist infestation before it is too late.